Continuing with Eis Gimel, chapter 3. VeHaeir Zehu HaNefesh VeHaTorah Nimshul. Maybe it's supposed to be Sheh HaNefesh? Probably supposed to be Zehu Sheh HaNefesh VeHaTorah Nimshulu B'ner. This is the idea that both the soul and the body are compared to a candle. Dishneihem Yachtov Kishem Klulim Hu Kamoi Ha'avuka Shekulua Klula Mikama Neres Yachtov VeHaer Eish Yachtov. And so, yeah, I think it is saying that when the soul and the Torah are united, so when we're putting those two together, then we are creating this bigger candle. So each one on their own are like a candle. We put them together, it's like we're making a torch that has many like strands, many candles woven together, kind of like Havdalah candle has many interwoven candles. And like, I'm not sure what he means here by Ur and Eish Yachtov. Or can mean both light and it can mean fire. And Eish really just means fire. So I guess he's saying there's maybe light and the fire together. I know, like in Chassidus, there's this idea that there's a difference between Ar and Eish. That Ar is like more like the light. It's something that's coming from above, coming from God that's created. And the fire is a process of burning. Fire is a process of fire isn't really a thing. It's really a process that you're transforming something from one state to another. It's moving from being, wood or oil or wax, and it's being transformed into a hot gas. And in the process, by creating heat, it then brings out the light that's really there. So there's this kind of potential, this light that's always there, and it just is being revealed or drawn forth stimulated by the fire. So maybe that's what he means. That there's this natural kind of emunah that's given to us, which is really the Ar, or our ability to think and our intuition, that's like the light. And then our efforts to actually learn and study and develop mental models and ways of thinking is the fire. But let's see. The B'Torah Ksiv, about the Torah, it's written, Miyaminai Eshtas Lamei, that it is from God's right hand a fiery law. Ksiv, and it's written, Halai Devarei Ka'esh, behold, my words are like fire. And so this fire of the Torah is a strong enough fire, so like we said, that in order to transform a bit like a deep cavern where the air quality is bad, then you need this stronger. It's not good enough just to have a candle. You need this torch, this stronger fire. And so the fire of the Torah is something that's able to burn up this destructive air, destructive atmosphere, and transform it into something pure. VeHaeir Eineinu haneshama lamata lislabish beguf gashmi v'nesinas haTorah lamata be'elam haza hu bichdei l'chayres hacheshech v'ha'afela de'elam haza u'legales es emes. And this is the idea that the purpose of the soul coming down into a physical body and being given the Torah as it is, not the spiritual Torah in the Gan Eden, but the way it is down here in the physical world, in physical mitzvahs and things like that, is in order for us to enlighten the darkness, and not only the darkness, but also the phalo, so this like thick darkness, this thick cloud of this world, this physical world, and to reveal the truth. Like it says, that the truth of God, and so again, in the word olam usually really translates as eternal, but I think in more modern times, it was also translated as to be the world. It's I guess you have both. I guess you have both in Tanakh. But so a lot of times it's translated as having both implications. And I think here he's saying that the truth of God is for, I guess, the purpose of bringing that into the world. To Shem Havaya. So what does this mean that the MS of Havaya is for the world, is brought into the world? To Shem Havaya, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of God, Pirusha, it means Haya Hayva V'yiyah Ka'echad, that God is, was, and will be. He was, is, and will be all at the same time. So this is the idea of how God transcends time and space, which is something that's beyond nature. So the name Havai represents this revelation of God as he transcends the rules and the boundaries of our world, that even time and space are something that's created by him. And there's this deeper essential truth that's unchanging. And again, this is something that even modern science recognizes, that the world was created from nothing, and even time and space for something that are created, but there's this deeper, more essential reality where those things don't exist or don't need to exist. And so this is the idea that God is a deeper truth that transcends what we actually see around us. That's also being created by him, but there's also something more fundamental that transcends that. So hine emes havaya la'olam, this idea that the truth of God is eternal, or the truth of God is in the world. So it's saying the real purpose and of the world and what keeps it going is really this truth of God, or its purpose is to reveal that truth. VeHaeir Eineinu, and this is the idea that nature itself, if you really look at it, is really something beyond nature. So the idea of nature is something that we get accustomed to because it always works that way. The sun always rises, the sun always sets, there's certain patterns. But if you really look at it very quickly, there's like, why should it be that way? There's no, so we say, okay, things fall, and we give it a name, we call it gravity, and we know the mathematics of it, but why should things fall? We don't really know why. I mean, there's different, theories and explanations about it, and I'm not saying those theories are not correct. Let's say, based on relativity, so there's this warping of space and time, but why is that happening? Why should matter be warping the space of time? So very quickly you get to the point where there is no answer. That's just the way it is. That's just the nature of the world. And that means what we call that nature is really just God's choice to create the world in a certain way, which is coming from this infinite, possibilities. And it was chosen to be this way. And that's really something that's beyond nature. In other words, it's not just a system, it's in this way of like a choice. And we can recognize this from nature itself. The very fact that the world progresses and it follows this set pattern, that every single day the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And same thing with everything else in the world. And everything else that God implanted, that this should be the nature of the world. And these are anything that's constant, that happens all times equally. That itself shows us that the nature is something that's beyond nature. So how do we see this? I think he's going to explain more, so let's keep going. The idea is, our sages say in Tractate Sukkah, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph, page 28a, Al Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, about the sage Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shalai hiniach davar gadol v'davar katan, that he didn't leave anything that he didn't study. He didn't leave a big thing or a small thing. So it says, what is the big thing that he made sure to study? What's the small thing? Davar gadol ma'aseh merkava. The big thing, the great thing, is the study of the ma'aseh merkava, which is the way that God is revealed in the world, like it's based on the idea of the prophecy of the divine chariot, and that's understanding godliness and the spheros and the angels and all that kind of stuff. So that's the wisdom of godliness, of metaphysics. And davar katan, the small thing, is havayes Abaye v'Rava, all of the questions and answers of Abaye and Rava, who were Chavrusas, and a lot of the Talmud is their questions and answers. So l'chura einim movin, seemingly it's not understood. Eich nikra havayes Abaye v'Rava davar katan. How can you call the questions and answers of Abaye and Rava something small? That's like the bulk of the Talmud. That's a lot of our Torah law, of our oral law. That is the whole foundation. That seems to be the main. Ikar really means like a trunk. That seems to be like the main body of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. D'masha kasav havayes d'Abaye v'Rava, harei eina kavana rak Abaye v'Rava levad. When it says the questions of Abaye and Rava, it doesn't mean just those sages, Abaye and Rava. Sharei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai hayatana Abaye v'Rava b'dar revi shel Amayraim, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived, he was a Tana, he was in the times of the Mishnah, and he lived many generations before him, Abaye and Rava, who were the fourth generation of the Amayraim in the times of the Talmud. So there was he lived way before them, and so obviously it doesn't literally mean that he was just learning what they said, because they didn't exist yet. B'tayvis Abaye v'Rava shehein the reason that it says Abaye and Rava is just a way of saying all of the details that are explained in the Talmud, because Abaye and Rava are the most common people that show up in every discussion. So therefore, they just use that as a way of saying that he learned all of the details and all the minutiae of the Torah law as explained in the Talmud. which was later be explained in the Talmud, but he already, studied that then before it was recorded and codified in the Talmud. Kopirish Rashi, like Rashi explains, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, some li by loses tam al davar halacha, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he applied himself to finding the reason for every single law in the Torah. He didn't just, right, you could just read the laws, but you need, in order to really understand them, you have to understand what's the reason, what's the source. There's a whole kind of ecosystem around each halacha in order to properly understand it, be able to apply it, and he applied himself to doing that and accomplished that for every law that he learned. So in that case, this idea that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai learned all those things means that he learned the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh. So how can we say that's a small thing? That's the whole Torah. And what do we mean by Ma'aser Merkava, that we call that a great thing and we consider that to be greater than all of the discussion in the Talmud? So the idea is, it's written, Yechezkel Aleph in Yechezkel Perek Aleph, that the angels, the highest angels, they were running back and forth like the appearance of a lightning bolt. That a lightning flash, it goes down to the ground and then it goes back up to the sky. If it's hard to see, usually, but if you look, you can find these slow motion footage. It's actually very fascinating, where you see the lightning sends out these feelers and it slowly extends out from the cloud, and these branching, and that's not as so bright yet. And actually, when it starts getting close to the ground, there starts being a little bit of lightning that comes up from the ground too. It's very hard to see that, to capture that. But then when it finally touches down, it touches something, then there's this big discharge of electricity going back up to the cloud, and that's the main lightning flash. So it goes, but that's the idea that it's, like the lightning, that it comes out and then it goes back. That's the way the angels were running, so to speak, that they were going out and coming back. That these holy angels, they're constantly yearning, or so to speak, running. But the idea of running spiritually is the idea of having a desire. They have this desire to be included and subsumed within the infinite, the light, the infinite one, blessed be He. But because God's desire is to come down into the world, like it says, that God did not create the world to be chaotic, He formed it so that it should be settled. Therefore, the angels, recognizing that God wants the world to exist and to be productive and to be ordered, therefore they come back down into the world, so to speak. And so this idea, so there's different things that are represented by angels. One thing is just the forces of nature, like Rambam says, those are sometimes called, or that's one aspect that's called angels. And so, for example, at least by some counts, there's actually 26, I believe, which is interesting. It's the gematria, the numerical value of the name Havaya, different forces or different values that define our world, define our universe, that don't really have any known reason why they should be that way. We're set to a certain value. So there's, the strength of gravity and the speed of light and all these different things, and those define our reality. And so those are one aspect of angels, that, in other words, these forces fundamentally had infinite possibilities. The fact that they're settling down and just coming into one specific form is because of God's constant desire to create the world and have it be stable and be the form that we have it. In a similar way, there's the idea of the angels of, let's say, in Torah and mitzvahs, and so there's this idea of wanting to connect to God in a more infinite way, but God desires that we should have it down here in time and space, where we have to do our efforts and work, and so therefore the Torah is expressed down here, and different things like that. But the fact that these angels are constantly like yearning to go up, so that it says elevates the throne of God, the glory of God is then revealed in a greater way. And I think we'll talk about this first. We'll see what he says about it, and then we'll talk about it. This is the general idea of the divine chariot. That the idea of the Merkava, I guess, is the idea that the angels are elevating the revelation of godliness to a higher level. And there are many different levels and aspects within this idea of a Merkava. So like many things that it's in Kabbalah, they're not one specific thing. They're a certain relationship, and they exist in many different levels where you have that type of relationship. Ukedi Rizal, like it explains in the writings of the Rizal, Sheish Kruv Chayis Veifan. There's many different levels of angels. There's cherubs, Kruvim. Then there's Chayis, the angels that are called these like either animals or just these like life forces. Aifanim means like circles or cycle angels. Kruvim is Srafim Ba'olam Habriya. So the angels that are called Kruvim and Srafim, these fiery angels, those are in the world of Bria. Chayes B'Yetzira V'Eifanim B'Asiya. And so there's the 8 different angels in the different worlds. One in the world of creation, formation, and action. And yeah, well, I mean, just in short, so the idea of the Kruvim and the Srafim are the world of Bria is the world that corresponds to Bina. So that's the idea of like the fundamental like it's the idea of the fundamental system that's created, that God created for the world, the basic laws of how our world's going to work, and the basic logic of the Torah would also be on that level. Then there's the level of the Chayes of Yetzira. That's the idea of like having certain archetypal forms. So these forces, let's say, combine. In our world, we have this idea of, let's say, trees and animals and all these different forms, which are certain ways that those fundamental concepts or forces in the world of Bria can be combined to give rise to these different types of creatures. But again, it's just in the concept still. In a similar way, the entire this is the idea of the halachas, like in the Mishnah, where the logic of the Torah is applied and paskin to go a certain way. And then the Ifanim are the idea of the actual like cycles of the sun and the moon and the weather and all these different things that are constantly changing and shifting the actual way that things are manifest. So let's say you have a tree, the way that the tree, if you can plant a lot of different plants, a lot of different trees, each one's going to grow a little differently based on the different combinations created by the cycles of the rain and the temperature and the sun and all these things. And actually, like if you look at a tree, the shape of the branches and all that kind of stuff and the bark, you count the rings show what the weather was over the years, and the shape of the branches kind of shows when it was sunny in this direction and when it was cloudy, and it pulls the tree in different directions. So you could think of the actualization of creating from the concept of a tree, a specific tree, as coming from the way that these various cycles interact with each other to create very specific local conditions where that tree is growing, and makes it manifest as this specific tree. And the same thing with animals and people and nations. There's all these different influences that are the fundamental forces that are guiding and pulling things in different directions, and that gives rise to the actual things that happen. So you have from this general concept of like, an animal or a tree or a person or a nation, and then you have these different forces and the way that they interact, and these different cycles of them, and they combine to create these different combinations. And that's what the idea of the world of Asiya. The Markava the Olam Habriya hi l'mayla harbe yeser Markava the Olam Hayetzira. And so in each of these worlds, you have this idea of the Markava, of the divine chariot, and the Markava, the world of Bria, is much higher than the divine chariot in the world of Yetzira. And so there's two descriptions of the divine chariot in the Nevi'im, one by Yechezkel and one by Yeshaya. And it says that the difference between their descriptions is like the difference between a country boy and a city boy and a country boy coming to see the king. Yeshaya ben Krach, Yeshaya, he gives a much more detailed description of the Markava, the divine chariot. And so it says that he is like a country boy that's coming to the big city. He sees the king. Ben Krach hu shemurgol b'riyas hamelech. I'm sorry, I mixed that up. The Ben Krach, he's the one that lives in the city, and so Yeshaya is the one that gives a shorter description. And so when he saw the king, he's used to seeing the king, and so he doesn't go into so many details because it's not as a big deal for him. Even though he's very affected by the greatness of the king and the glory of his splendor, or however you want to translate all those terms. But when he's seeing the king, he's not just focused on all the pomp and the how how glorious it is on the outside, he's focused more on the inner things because he's used to seeing those external things, but he's able to see past that too. He also understands more about what's going on, what these things represent, and how the kingdom is being conducted, and things like that. And he has a great pleasure in these deeper things and in this appreciating this kind of stuff. Understanding about it. I guess the idea is, let's say you had, if you see the king, I'm not sure if the metaphor is more like a parade or if he's going to the king for an audience. It seems here that it's more that he's going to the king for an audience, and you could be impressed by the palace and the guards, or you could be more impressed by the way the king is making decisions about policy and excited about that kind of thing. And this causes a deeper inner humility and subservience to the king, that he recognizes that the king is running the country with his wisdom and things like that. In contrast to the country boy, that sees the king, he's not used to seeing the king. He doesn't understand the way, how things work and what the customs are and everything like that, and how they conduct things and how the ministers work and all that stuff. And so he's more impressed by just seeing the kings and the guards and all this kind of stuff, the whole fanfare, and therefore his bittul is more external, that it's more, it's not from really appreciating so much what the king's doing, it's just from feeling this, that there's something. The idea of chitzoni and pnimi is more whether it's like something that's external to you or it's intrinsic to you. So the inner bittul is that you really relate to the king's, what he stands for and his message and what he's trying to accomplish, and you personally care about that, and you feel like this patriotism to that, and that's an inner, because he's representing you and your values. So that's like the inner thing, is that it's really coming from inside of yourself. And the external thing is more that you say, wow, that's a really amazing person. He's so powerful. He has all this stuff, but it doesn't really have to do with me. It's just, I would be afraid of him. I'd be impressed by him, but you don't see that you relate to him in an inner way. It doesn't really like represent you. So that's more of the chitzonius connection. And the comparison to this above in godliness, hu b'srafim she'em ba'ilma bria, are the angels, the Srafim angels, which are in the world of Bria. So they are like this higher level of a connection, an appreciation of godliness. Because it says that the supernal mother, which is the idea of Bina, God's like understanding, or the understanding of God, both of those, that is, it says it nests on the throne. This is the world of understanding. So in other words, Bria is called like the divine throne, or the divine chariot, and that's where this godly understanding rests. And so the Srafim represent this idea of understanding God, understanding, so again, like in science, that would be understanding that how the fundamental forces of our world are really something that's just being created, and they don't have to be that way, and seeing that outer limit of our understanding and where our world begins and where the realm of infinite possibility is there. That's kind of that border. And then in Torah would be understanding the inner reason behind the halachos and recognizing that it's not just about, these external laws of just do this and do that, but there's an inner reason about bringing godliness and about developing a person and their potential, and seeing that inner understanding of the Torah. That would be like the idea of Srafim, the fundamental principles that are like the spirit of the law, and things like that. Srafim heim ba'ilm habriya. So these angels that are the Srafim are in the world of Bria. Harehem masigim de'arein seif kadishim muvdal ve'ech dekula kamek klochashim. And they recognize that the infinite light of God is totally transcends anything that we see. They recognize and how everything in the world is like nothing. And again, scientifically, this is the idea of recognizing that really reality is far beyond what we actually see in our universe, that there's infinite possibilities, and what we see is just one tiny, minuscule possibility, but it doesn't at all have to be this way. It could be totally different in ways that we couldn't even imagine. So that's how it is physically, and the same thing with the Torah. It's recognizing that the real essence of the Torah is something that transcends any time or place or any specific details, and the fact that we express it in a certain way because of the way people are and the way that society is and because of our history and all these things, that's just one little expression of it. But it's something that's, much greater, and it's recognizing also as an individual, recognizing that any accomplishments that we could have, that we could do, are really nothing compared to the true potential that God gives us in our soul, and having that sense that we, whatever we do in our life is just this little example, a little taste of the infinite possibilities that God gives us, opportunities that we have. VeHaeir Eineinu, and so this gives this real inner bittul, where it's this sense of humility and that comes from really, feeling this in yourself, feeling that recognizing our limitations and seeing in ourselves also that we have this infinite, this spark of this infinite inside of us, and that whatever we're doing, whatever we're understanding, is just this little caricature of that, but it's not able to really capture that truth within ourselves or within the world around us. Ta'al shem zeh nikra srafim. This is why the angels are called srafim. Shemis batlim b'nayam hasagasam zu, that they are nullified, they're like burned up, so to speak, in the pleasure, the enjoyment of this recognition, that they really enjoy, they relish in the fact that of their own limitations, so to speak, and they're recognizing that it's really something that's totally beyond understanding. And again, this is something that a healthy person should enjoy the fact and appreciate the fact that there's limits to us, and that really having the sense of wonder of what's beyond us should be something that we really enjoy, seeing those edges of human understanding. But the Eineinu are still limited. They just understand and recognize that there is something beyond their understanding, but they don't know what it is. So they recognize that there are these limits. They recognize that there's something out there that's way beyond what we can know and understand, but it's a mystery. So therefore the Eineinu, because they don't recognize what it is, so therefore it's more of this external bittul. It's like somebody that kind of like the difference between, it says you could have two people visit a very wise scholar. One is himself a scholar and one is a simple person. So they both recognize that this person is very wise, but one really knows and understands his brilliance, and they see, what he's able to do that other can't do. The other one just says, I just know that he's a big professor, but I don't really understand what that means or how he's different than a different professor and things like that. So in a similar way, they find him or recognizing that, yeah, there's something beyond me, but I don't really know what it is, while the Srafim actually have that more appreciation of what that is. And that's also why the Eineinu have this big, so to speak, noise. They make a lot of, it says that they clamor or make noise and again, oppose, in opposite the service of the Srafim. They don't understand the king, they don't understand God's greatness, so then why are they getting so excited? Why are they making so much noise? The truth is that it's interdependence. Really, that's the cause. That when somebody's making a big deal and making a big noise about something, that's because they don't really understand and appreciate it. So therefore it causes friction because it's outside of them. And so it causes this, as opposed to when something is in you, that it's just part of you and it's just fluid and it's calm and it's just taken as a matter of course, and it's a much inner feeling. Derech mashal, and like a mashal for this is mishu masig seichel amak beyeser imasiga bituv any marish klau. Somebody that understands something very deep. If they really understand it well and thoroughly, then they don't get all excited about it. It's just settled in them. It's just, yeah, that's the way it is. Actually, the understanding draws him deeper into the idea that he's looking into it and he's thinking about it. And he's very focused and very attached to the idea. She becomes, instead of becoming excited and outward extroverted, he becomes really hyper focused. He becomes totally like nullified. In other words, he's not seeing or hearing anything around him because of the sweetness and the beauty of this idea. It just draws him in. And he's very calm and at peace, and it's a very inner, peaceful experience. It's very tranquil. But somebody that recognizes there's something big here, but he doesn't know what it is, so then he gets very excited, and it's expressed in this outer way. So then he's going to be very, like kind of, not in a bad way, in a good way, he's going to be agitated and stirred up until he's able to figure it out, because he feels that there's something there, but he doesn't know what it is, and until he's able to find the way in, there's a lot of excitement there. But once you find it, then it brings this tranquility, and just the person's drawn into it. And so the same way, the Eifanim angels, because they don't understand, that's what causes them to have this excitement, this outer excitement that's like noisy. It's understood from this. So from this we can understand how the idea of the divine chariot that's connected to the Srafim angels is a much higher level of a markava, of a chariot, than that expressed by the Chayes and the Eifanim angels. And so we just talked about these three general levels, or really kind of two, but really if you're going to get into it, there's infinite stages and levels that are higher and higher. All the way to the highest chariot, Shabbat, which is the chariot in the world of Atzilos, which is the world of godliness. At that stage it says that the Aves, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they are the divine chariot. The Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Atzilos, and they are the vehicle that's expressing God's kindness and justice and beauty. The Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes of Atzilos are being the vehicles that were able to express that and channel that into the world, were Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And so relative to this, even the highest level of the chariot of the angels of Bria, Tir, and Asiya, those are all like nothing compared to this vehicle of how godliness can be expressed on this deeper level of the world of Atzilus, that the specifically souls and the Sadiqim can bring out this deeper level of godliness, Shehi B'chinas Elokus Mamish, which is actually Elokus. And I think the idea is that, there's two aspects. One is that the soul is able to have a deeper bittul, a deeper connection, and it's able to really get the essence of godliness, but that's expressed in Elokus, something that's creative. And so angels are static, they're not able to change, but soul is able to be actively and creatively expressing these attributes of kindness and justice and beauty and truth in the world, and that is able to express the real essence of these things in a much deeper way than the angels can. Zehu de Markava Nikra Davar Gadol, and this is why the Markava is called a great thing. The Yeski Kol Inan Markava Hakesef Chuka Lales Beiliacher Ilay Alts Gresser and Hecher, because the whole idea of the Markava is this desire, this yearning to rise higher and higher, and to always in other words, this idea of constantly feeling we need to improve, constantly feeling that anything we can accomplish is nothing and it's inadequate compared to the true potential that we have, the true glory of God that we're trying to express. That's a very important thing, and that I guess is that constant drive to grow is greater. First of all, that's what makes us grow and get bigger and greater, but it's also in a way more important than the specifics of doing a specific thing, I guess. In other words, understanding the halacha the way it is right now in its current state is a small thing compared to that general desire to always grow and come closer to Hashem and have a better understanding and a better representation, which is really the driving force behind that. I think that's the idea. And so he's saying that this idea that's called a davar gadol, because this is the idea of having this growth mindset, constantly wanting to grow and improve and come to something higher. Okay, and that is the end of Eis Gimel chapter 3.